Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday afternoon. Welcome to Seminole Sidelines. My name is Nick Carlisle. I'm joined by Bob Ferrante, Kurt Weiler, and publisher Jerry Kutz. Publisher from Ireland? Well, you're not from Ireland anymore. You're publisher from back home in Tallahassee now, aren't you, Jerry?
I am. I'm half Irish, so there you go.
Oh, I guess. Are you? I thought you were German.
No,
Isn't Kutz
no.
German?
Yeah, it is, but my father was Italian, and they changed the name from Cuso to Kutz. So I'm half Italian and half Irish.
Okay, there you go. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We're giving Pat a little bit of a break as he's been doing a lot of the shows recently, but a very important day today. And it kind of just felt a little bit different because we have not listened to Norvell and the coordinator speak after a regular season loss in a very long time, especially not a loss to the quality of loss that we saw on Saturday. So going into it, I personally was very interested to see kind of the verbiage that Norvell and the rest of the coordinators use, because coach speak is very much a thing. And, to my surprise, a lot of the verbiage that, we have been saying amongst ourselves, I think a lot of the fan base has been saying as well. Norvell used the word sickening to describe this loss. Kurt and Bob, what did you guys think of what Norvell had to say today? And did you feel moved in any particular way about what you heard from Norvell and the coordinators?
Yeah, I think we've learned by now that Mike Norvell is going to kind of never go full Nick Saban of kind of using his press conferences with us as motivator to the team, as trying to light a fire under the team's butts, if you will, whatever have you. I think that's not really his MO. It felt like today was about as close as we ever seen him get. Now, I will say, I think a lot of it he put on himself. I mean, obviously he talked about areas where the team needs to be better, but at the end of the day, I think it's a credit to Mike Norvell, and I think it's what a lot of people wanted to hear, that he was like, at the end of the day, if the team's not ready for a game, and I don't think we played like we were ready, that was not our best, that at the end of the day comes on me. And I think a lot of people appreciated the amount of pretty direct ownership Mike has taken about this, because I think we've all thought, for all the problems on the field, I think we've thought he wasn't blameless in this. And so I think a lot of people appreciated him coming out and getting ahead of it. And I can only imagine, what the last few days have been like for him. It definitely seems like he was still feeling it a little this afternoon.
To add to what Kurt just said, he opened the press conference by thanking all the FSU fans who had traveled so far to see that game. Probably 30,000 would be a fair guess. And I think he felt a responsibility for letting them down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the words, I think he said at one point that nobody was happy watching film after getting back. Did they get back on Tuesday, or did they get back late on Monday? I know they had a day planned in Ireland. Yeah, so I mean, I kind of have to doubt that even that last final day in Ireland was super enjoyable for that football team. But go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, from what it sounds like, I know we had somebody on our board say, Mike said today that they early Sunday morning had a film session with the offense and defense separately. And I think the quote from Mike was, nobody was in a good mood. But I know someone on our board posted and saw them later in the day as they were seeing Ireland. And it seemed like they were, I don't want to say they were in a good mood, but they were at least enjoying it and not trying not to dwell on that and take away from that unique experience. I know a few people apologized to Florida State fans they saw in Ireland on Sunday and kind of just said, I'm sorry for what we put on the field. So I think if a loss like that isn't a motivator, I don't know what will be. And it sounds like the early returns have been good, which is encouraging. But yeah, I thought it was smart of Mike to lead with that today, like Jerry said, because I think I was talking to someone, I forget who, of saying, as much went into that trip for so many people. And I would hope that game didn't ruin people. If they took a whole week to go over, I would hope that game didn't ruin their entire trip. If so, I might advise you to reconsider some things. But it was a big commitment for a lot of people. So I said to someone, I think he should make mention of something, of apologizing almost for the effort they put on the field, for the commitment financially so many people put in to go see that trip, and he did. He led off with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially having it be in a primetime slot there, not only were there was a lot of garnet and gold over in Ireland, especially in comparison to Georgia Tech fans, but also just the primetime slot, a lot of eyeballs on the game. And you would hope that with that product on the field, and, you talk like you think they would be blown out, but, physically and the way that they played, it almost feels like they got blown out. You would hope that Norvell would open up the conference and say, look, to the fans, especially also knowing that BC is also sold out. Thank you guys so much for your support for everything, despite the way that we played. Bob, what did you think of Norvell's comments?
I think for him to speak about ownership and what the coaches and players, how they responded, he answered a couple of questions from us taking ownership. When we asked about Jalen Lucas, for example, only getting on the field for 7 plays, and he didn't respond to the 7 plays as much as the 3 touches that Jalen had on offense. And he said, that's on me to get the ball to Jalen Lucas much more frequently, because he is a playmaker, because he has shown it. He earned it through the preseason, through the spring. I think that's one example. A lot of the takeaways I have are, I think we were asking questions about who can play more, who can step into various roles. And I think it was a really clear storyline for all the coaches to say it was a 7-drive game for each team. It messed up our rotations on offense and defense. You can call that an excuse if you want. I think it's probably pretty legit. I mean, there were just some longer drives. Unfortunately, on the defensive side, they didn't get off the field enough 3-and-outs, for example. So we didn't see, for example, like Sione Lolohea, who had a really good statistical game for the number of snaps that he had. So I think there are some smaller moves that are going to be considered. If you're looking for a massive depth chart shakeup, I think a lot of fans were maybe going into today thinking there might be some moves, some announcements. The depth chart doesn't work that way from Mike Norvell. It just ain't. You might see something Monday night, but it wasn't going to happen today in a really public setting like for us in a press conference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there were some minor depth chart changes today. There weren't anything major. I think probably the biggest one, if you could claim that it's the biggest one, was probably Kevin Knowles being named sole starter at that strong safety position opposite of Shaheem Brown. Devontae Brown was the starter heading into the Ireland game. It was the UPS secondary, the Brown and Brown. What can Brown do for you? That is no longer the case. Looks like Conrad Hussey is going to be the sole starter at that position. Jeremiah Byer is also now listed as sole starter at right tackle instead of sharing a co-starter with Robert Scott. Kevin Knowles now is the lone starter at nickel instead of being co-starter with Earl Little Jr. So there were some minor shakeups there with the depth chart, but going back to some of the coach speak that we were expecting today, I think both Papuchis and Fuller, we didn't get to talk to Atkins today. Some of the verbiage that they use, soft at the edge, I think was something that Fuller and Papuchis both said. I wasn't exactly expecting them to come right out and use that verbiage, but kind of in the similar vein, Jerry, Bob, Kurt, if you heard or all of what Fuller had said, what were your opinions on his comments there?
I don't remember the last time we've heard a coach, head coach, or coordinator use soft, and in context, folks, not soft, just soft on the edge. And I think they put it in good context. I don't think we've heard those words used by this staff since they arrived in 2020.
Well, and I think Fuller also commented, or Papuchis did, that Lolohea, was not soft on the edge, which in coach speak means that maybe Marvin was.
Maybe.
Right?
And he talked about Sione probably having a larger role based off how he performed in game 1 in game 2. So I think, I think that I can't say I entirely disagree. I mean, I think that's the side of the ball where you need to challenge them a little more. I think a lot of when you look at the offense, I know Mike has talked about how they need to be more explosive. We saw that a little more later in the game. Obviously, I think need to be a bit more balanced, Mike talked about, which that really falls on the play caller. I mean, that falls on Mike at the end of the day. And but I think the defensive side of the ball is you need to challenge them a little because, I think they didn't rise to the physicality. I think there are less like things you can point to of the coaches didn't adapt things as well, and as much as just like the execution wasn't there. I think a pretty telling quote I thought from Adam Fuller today was kind of, he talked about, I think we have some very strong, very powerful players in the defensive line, but if they don't play with technique, if they don't play with grit, that might not be enough on its own. It kind of takes the combination of everything coming together, and it feels like maybe some of those defensive linemen were trying to rely on power alone and not play with proper technique, and a experienced, technique sound offensive line taught them a lesson on Saturday.
So, hey, let me say this about that. I picked up on that too, Kurt, exactly what you were saying there. And I think that for you to play with physicality, you have to be confident first, right? I mean, most people, if they're not 100% sure what they're seeing, they're going to play careful. They don't want to run themselves out of a play. And so I think what I saw, and I thought he spoke to me on today, was that if you notice, he was saying about it's where your hand placement is and all that, technique and hand placement. I felt like we were off balance the whole night. That what Georgia Tech was doing with the eye candy and the guys in motion, it was messing with the linebackers big time. But I think it also messed with the front. And if you got guys like Darrell Jackson and Farmer with their ears pinned back, they're a whole different problem to deal with than when they're trying to figure out what it is that you're doing. And I think that had a lot to do with it. Now, Fuller did say that he didn't think that they were as well prepared as they should be. He took that responsibility. Fuller did, and said, I don't think we were as prepared as we should be. Now, part of that is mental, of course. We weren't mentally prepared enough. And part of it's emotionally prepared. But I think we're a much more physical team than what we showed yesterday. But it's hard to be physical when you're confused.
Do you think it was a confidence thing, Jerry? Like once they got into the game, it was a lack of confidence in what they were seeing? Because I believe it was Fuller who said something to the effect of, if you're not playing confident, you're not playing well, you overcompensate, do your job, is I think the phrase that a lot of the coach speak is. Do you get the sense, and Kurt and Bob, you can chime in, do you get the sense that it was a confidence thing in digesting what they were seeing on the football field, and that was affecting how they played?
To me, I thought what he was talking about is you've got a responsibility in this defense in order for us to fit, and you need to do your job, do your assignment, be confident that your neighbor is going to do his and make the fit. But what I heard Fuller say, and I heard Mike say, and I saw with my own eyes, was guys were trying to make a play that wasn't in their assignment, Mm-hmm. And I think for a defense to fit and form the wall that Fuller was talking about, you got to have confidence that the neighbor on either side of you is going to do their job. And that's how I read that.
Well, I forget if it was Mike or Adam, but one of them kind of, I think, straight up got asked, did you think the defense played tentatively, played like almost afraid to make a mistake? And when you're so afraid to make a mistake, you let the play come to you, and by then you've kind of already let the guy get past you. You've already lost.
You're catching blockers.
Yeah.
You're catching blockers.
And another interesting thing, too, I mean, we've dogged the linebackers, and I'm not disagreeing with dogging the play of the linebackers. It was not up to snuff. I think Adam basically said, the linebacker play was, I think, not ideal was the words he used. But he also
it was probably the best two words that he could have used to describe that. Go ahead.
But he also talked about, and I do think there's some truth to this, when your defensive line's getting pushed back, that messes up everyone's gaps and everyone's angles and all that. That changes the entire nature of a play when you are losing the line of scrimmage, like Florida State quite often did on defense on Saturday. And that changes things and makes things harder for a linebacker. I think we had our questions. I think, truthfully, we had our questions about the linebacker core. We thought the defensive line and the secondary were both going to be good enough to make up for that. If one of those units or either of those units is not playing up to snuff, that becomes a real problem for the linebackers.
Yeah, I agree. I thought, and I think I even wrote it. I know I've said it. I thought that we were going to get really good defensive line play, which was going to make it easier on the linebackers. And instead, the opposite happened.
Yeah.
And we got soft play from the defensive line. They were getting knocked back into the linebackers, which is making it much more difficult on the linebackers.
Final question here before we take a short break. I kind of, in the fallout of this game, I went back to, I think it was that after the Boston College game last year, and I can't remember if it was Akeem Dent or Shaheed Brown who brought up communication on the defensive back end and just communication on the defense in general and how important that is when kind of deciphering what the offense is doing, making sure you're fitting into gaps and making sure that you understand what's coming and everybody does their job. I guess my question is, how much did communication and learning to communicate with one another, how much did that play into what we saw on Saturday?
I think it's big, huge. Where I think I saw it the most from in the stadium is when they would shift at the last second and go to a different formation. Your linebackers have to be talking to each other. Everybody's got to be talking. And when they put a guy in motion across the field, that's, the linebacker would go in motion with the back across the field and oftentimes get hung up on one of the other linebackers trying to get there. And he got there late every time. So it was an easy go, for the quarterback. They can identify its man coverage from the motion. And then the quarterback had a wide open back in the flat that we were trailing. And I asked that question of Gladden about how they used to do that back in the day. And if they were in man coverage and they put a guy in motion, they would switch to what they called banjo coverage. So instead of me, the linebacker on the side where the motion begins, trying to run through all the muck to cover the guy, they would switch. And so one of the other linebackers would pick him up, and the other linebackers would assume his assignment, right? Mm-hmm. And throughout the game, I kept thinking, it's a really tough ask for a linebacker to chase a running back that far across the field. So that's a scheme change that I think I'm curious to see if they might make.
Any other thoughts on that from you, Kurt, and you, Bob?
Yeah, I would just say, again, Cam Riley was not here in the spring, so this is a tough ask for him. He's flying a lot of reps without a lot of experience, 2 scrimmages, etc. We liked Blake Nicholson to a certain extent, 17 snaps. Would like to see him get more, but it's just year 2 for him too. It's new for everybody. DJ Lundy was limited in camp with an injury. We haven't seen Sean Murphy on the football field very much because of his injury. A lot of major questions about each linebacker and how they communicate with each other. And you add in the green dot component of Adam Fuller's talking to somebody. And then you add in the component of Georgia Tech's helmet communication to their linebacker wasn't working in the second half. And then Florida State has to agree to not use their communication in the second half. So yes, when we talk about communication, I think there's a lot of things flying around in a first game. In a week 0, it was a lot to throw at these guys. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so we're going to take a quick break to show some love to our sponsors, Backshore Apparel, who have very kindly sponsored the Osceola and Seminole Sidelines for the month of September. So we're going to hear from them very quickly. When we come back, going to talk a little bit about just how the comments today from the coaching staff may or may not have changed our perception of what happened on Saturday, and what that means moving forward as Boston College comes in on Monday. So we will see you back in 45 seconds. Here's a word from Backshore Apparel.
The Backshore. That stretch of fluffy sand just beyond the reach of the salty waves. The place reserved for volleyball nets, cookouts, and the air filled with fun and laughter. Celebrate the Backshore with Backshore Apparel. Grab an amazingly soft and comfy Backshore Apparel beach hoodie to keep you protected from the sun's harmful rays. Or the Backshore revamped trucker hat, a modern twist on a classic favorite. Crafted from moisture-wicking fabrics, ensuring they're lightweight and breathable. Not to mention durable with their unique floating feature. Shop now at BackshoreApparel.com. And right now, FSU fans get 10% off your order with code FSU10.
Man, I'll tell you what, I'm not exactly sure where the Backshore is, but I would much rather have been at the Backshore than driving home sulking after what we all saw on Saturday. Again, thank you so much to Backshore Apparel for sponsoring the Osceola and Seminole Sidelines. We greatly appreciate you. So we've already talked a little bit about the comments that Norvell, Fuller, Papuchis made today, kind of about the verbiage of what they said and what exactly that means. I kind of left the game and after watching it a second time and said, okay, so how does this actually get corrected? Because it seemed like such a bizarre loss in the way that a lot of the things that we've seen Norvell and his coaching staff kind of repair over the last few years, the physicality, the the emotional maturity, all of those things that are in the culture, the DNA of the program seem to not be there sometimes on Saturday. So it kind of had that bizarre feeling to it. So how does that stop and not carry over to Monday? And the answer that I came up with was, well, this team just has to own it. There can't be any excuses. This team just has to own what happened to them. They have to own everything leading up to the game. And then you have to go out, flush it, and go play another week of football. Obviously we only got to talk to Norvell and the coordinators today. We'll be able to talk to some players tomorrow. Did you get the sense from the coaching staff that they were able to say, okay, we own it? And certainly Norvell's comments suggest that, but we own it. Let's move on. We know what we need to fix. Did you guys get the sense from the comments today that they're ready to move on and really focus on Boston College?
Absolutely. I did. And that's been his modus operandi. I remember last couple of years ago when we lost to what was it, Jacksonville State. The coaches went into that meeting. I wrote about this, expecting maybe to get fired, after the Hail Mary pass for a touchdown. And but it was business as usual for Mike. It was like, what do we do wrong? How do we fix it? Let's talk about the next opponent. And that emotional intelligence is that's a trademark of his. And so I expected they've already had that meeting. Now, and you guys can comment on that before I get to my second point if you want. I mean, do you agree with me on that?
Yeah, no, I would think so, but just in case, somebody had any other opinion, but
yeah,
I think it's tough not to peel paint, right? It's tough not to just go in and just tear everybody up. But we see from like the cinematic recap how Mike Norvell handles it, what he says to players. I think our questions still are, who are some of the leaders in certain position groups? I'm betting that's where Jerry was going. I think we know it.
That was point two.
We don't know at every position group. Go ahead, Jerry. Here you go. I teed it up for
you. Wow, no, you knock
it out of the park. It's a 65 mile per hour fastball, Jerry. You can't swing and miss here.
No, oh, trust me.
Oh,
you haven't seen me play baseball.
I don't know that I want to see you play baseball.
No, you don't. But hey, I couldn't break light bulbs with my bat. But at any rate, the thing about it to me is, every team has to be player owned. It really does. It and it doesn't matter how much Mike's hurting or buys owns it or Fuller. You got to have your players. They've got to be embarrassed. They have to. And I'm sure Mike called in. And listen, let's go back a week. Going into this football game, and I think maybe I underestimated it. I ignored it because maybe I was lazy or too optimistic. But I think we all had some questions about who are the leaders on this team, and particularly on defense.
Yes.
Because when Peyton's the only really returner on the defensive front. Farmer has some experience, but he wasn't a guy that factored much last year. And, you can't expect Jones to walk in and be a leader. It took Verse a while. It took Fisk a while. So we had a void of leadership on the defensive front, in my opinion, going into the game. And nobody, in my mind's eye, stepped up and took it over. They didn't own it during the game. And I'm sure Mike and Odell have identified some guys that they probably put their arm around and said, it's time,
I would imagine that one of those people is probably Pat Payton. I mean, he really, I mean, I don't think we talked to Pat Payton this preseason, did we, guys, after practice? We did.
Yeah.
I can't recall if he was asked about, his leadership, but I mean, just the way that Pat Payton carries himself, he seems like just a quieter, more reserved guy to begin with. Is he one of those guys that needs to put on the bootstraps and say, okay, it's time to be a leader? Just bluntly, can he do that?
I asked him at HC Kickoff, I guess, kind of his leadership style. And he definitely said he was a lead by example guy. And I think AZ has said similar things. I think Fentrell has said similar things. I think this defense has a bunch of guys who I think do the right thing and can be those types, but you can't have a defense built entirely of those types. You do need to have that guy who's willing to get after his teammates. And I think if a loss like what they went through on Saturday doesn't bring out that person, doesn't push someone to say, I need to be this person, then I'm not sure what will.
No, I agree with you, Kurt. I mean, that's a long flight home, and I'm sure there was a lot of conversation since that game. And you may not want to be a leader, and I've heard guys who became great leaders say this, but at some point, I mean, you don't want your team to suck. I mean, football's hard enough when you're winning. It's miserable when you're losing. So there's a big incentive to step up. I think Shaheem is the mouthy one, the vocal one. I think Patrick Payton is the emotional one and probably has the highest football IQ. So they're both very capable. I saw Lundy, trying to lead, but I think, a lot of that was because he had the dot on his helmet and he was probably communicating what was coming from the bench, because he's kind of a quiet, laid back. I don't want to say laid back, but he's just not a real vocal guy. But you have to become one, Somebody has to be that guy. And I'm sure Odell will do everything he can do. He'll put a boot up some people's rears. But I think what this is going to take
He's done that over lesser things, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think this is going to take an arm around the shoulder and say, this is your opportunity, maybe your last opportunity to be a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Just overall, guys, listening to what they had to say today, did you come out of the press conference today feeling more assured about, what the potential response of this team will be on Monday? Or did you feel about the same as you did before heading into it? Like, did the comments from the coaching staff make you feel a little bit better about, the not only the practice that they had yesterday, which was closed to the media, but the practices that we're going to see tomorrow and the preparation? Do you feel better about that? Bob, I'll go to you.
I hate to say no, just because I want to hear it from the players more than anybody else, more than the coaches. But I think when you read body language of the coaches, Adam Fuller was definitely, he was feeling down. He wasn't going to try and put lipstick on a pig or anything today. I think Mike Norvell definitely tried because that's what he wants to exude. JP got some good questions about special teams and Fitz's kicks, and the swinging gate 2-point play was easier for him to have those kind of moments. I really want to hear what some of the players say, Thursday and Friday when we talk to them in practice. Honestly, I kind of came out of the game. I've got some glass half full optimism in certain areas, but there's a lot of harsh realism over what we think through 60 minutes these guys are. And it didn't line up with the preseason camp, but I still think it's early for a lot of these guys with so many new pieces coming in, so many new transfers. I think one of the coaches mentioned that today. It's really hard when all these new transfers come in and to have a game one look really good, just because I don't even remember how many transfers in their first year in Tallahassee started that game on Saturday. It felt like 10, 12. I mean, it was just a lot of guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Kurt.
I don't know how much the truth of the matter for me is I kind of, once I was sitting with it a little more, even before today, felt like this team was going to bounce back. That's kind of been the Mike Norvell MO. It's a unique situation, obviously, but really since 0-4, this team has responded at a remarkably high level with the success they've had. And so I'm somewhat confident. I don't know if today made that a ton more, but I think I don't know. I mean, I totally get why it's unfounded. I think, like you said, Bob, I think some of it is based around that is not the team we saw this preseason. And like they're just not, I can't fathom them just totally falling off a cliff. But I don't know. I think I was encouraged by what they talked about with ownership by Mike Norvell, definitely not shying away from from being a little more candid than he normally is in those press conferences, and definitely true for Adam Fuller and John Papuchis as well.
Yeah. Bob made the point that he wants to see, the players kind of echo that sentiment, or at least exude that when they go to practice tomorrow. That was kind of what I wanted to close with. What do you guys want to see at practice tomorrow? Because we've all been at pretty much every single practice. We've seen what the practice is like for this team. We've seen what they go through. We're probably sick of watching them do the same stuff over and over again. But I feel like after a loss like this, you can't help but go and try and look at it with a new lens when you're going to this practice. Is the intensity there? Does it match what we expect to see? Are we seeing new people be more vocal than they were in the previous 4 weeks? What are some of the things that you guys are looking forward to seeing tomorrow, or going to be looking for as we close the show here?
I'll speak first because there was a pregnant silence. But
I asked the hard-hitting questions. What can I say? The philosophical warm burgers.
Well, what I expect to see and what I want to see is a coaching staff that doesn't panic. I really want to see business as usual. Now, what I hope to see is I hope to see some more urgency from the players themselves. And that can be the way you described it, verbally, a high tempo practice. What I would love to see is some real open field tackling, old school, let's go, full pads, leave the donuts at the coffee shop and start tackling each other. But I know I won't see that. But I think it's important that the coaches come out there and don't show panic. Don't change everything like, oh God, we're in trouble. I think they need to stay confident in what they're doing. And look, Georgia Tech may turn out to be a pretty good team, y'all.
I think they will.
We might get down the road and they're pretty good. But I do think that coaching film, as I wrote about, I want to see teaching. I want to see corrections, and whatever it was that we weren't doing right in our on the ends, I want to see Papuchis coaching that up. I want to see Odell, being Odell with his defensive guys and creating more urgency. And I would like to see some leadership, some passion from his interior guys. And that's something we haven't seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is going to wrap up the show today. We're trying to keep it short as we don't want to jump our boat into the prediction side of things. We're going to save that for a show later down the line. And obviously, I think we'll have a better idea of what we want and what we expect after we see practice tomorrow. But thank you all so much for watching this episode of Seminole Sidelines. Kurt has a recap story of what Norvell said earlier today and his thoughts on that. Jerry has a great column up on the Osceola.com as well. What was the title, Jerry? No Time to Panic or something along those lines. Essentially, it's just
Don't
what
panic,
you just said.
move on.
Don't panic and move on, which I think is the ideal sentiment that a lot of Florida State fans are at least trying to talk themselves into right now. There might be a little tiny bit of panic, but it's gonna be a big week or a big game on Monday. So we'll have coverage leading up all the way up into that. Pat is working on a scouting report for Boston College right now. Excuse me. That'll be coming out in the coming days. Of course, we'll have more content in the days leading up to that Monday night game as Florida State hosts Boston College to a sold-out crowd. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for all the comments, and thank you for your continued support of the Osceola. You can read more of our stuff at floridastate.rivals.com. My name is Nick Carlisle. Thanks for joining us. That's Bob Ferrante, Kurt Weiler, and publisher Jerry Kutz. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you all another time. Thank you so much.